Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's e-broadcast, Contemporary Customer Engagement, Can Your Center Support It? My name is Nancy Jameson, and I'm a Principal Analyst at Frost & Sullivan in Information and Communication Technologies, and I'll be both your moderator and one of today's presenters. Today's e-broadcast is designed to be interactive between you and the presenters, and you can participate in the Q&A session by asking questions at any time during the presentation. Just type your question into the Q&A text box in the top left portion of your console, or by clicking on the Q&A widget, then click the Submit button. You're also able to enlarge the slides at any time by dragging the bottom right corner of the slide window. The slides will advance automatically throughout the event. If you're experiencing problems with the program, please press the F5 key on your keyboard to refresh your console or close and relaunch the presentation. And you can also visit our eBroadcast help guide by clicking on the help widget on the bottom right, or simply submit a help question. Today's program will also be available on demand by visiting www.frost.com/preferences so that you can share your program with your colleagues, and we'll also be live tweeting. So you can join in on the conversation using hashtag FSPreferences, that's FS all in word preferences, and join in on the conversation with us. Before we get started, let's take a look at today's agenda. First, I'm going to be giving a brief overview of how we got to this complex world of omnichannel customer care and what are the challenges and roadblocks to getting there. And then next, I'm going to host an interactive discussion with Chris Hodges, Senior Vice President at Noble Systems, to tie in some of the pertinent topics facing the contact center today. And finally, we'll open it up to the audience to submit any additional questions you might have for either one of us today. So be sure to start submitting your questions now. At the end of today's presentation, I'd like to ask our audience to participate in a brief survey and evaluation of today's program, and the survey will appear in the center of your screen. But first, we have a polling question for the audience. We wanted to know. Simply click on the answer that best fits your top concern, and we'll look at the results just before our audience Q&A. And polling question is, what keeps you up at night? Changing consumer preferences, integrating legacy systems and applications, compliance and government regulations, adding new interaction channels, and catering to a younger workforce. Lots and lots and lots of things to think about. So with all that said, let's get started. So for me to start, I wanted to tell you a story, and it's probably a familiar story, and one that will make it a little bit clear why I have a picture of my friend Mr. Whale here. Anyway, I live in Silicon Valley, and this past summer I drove across the country from Florida to Southern California and then went up the coast to home. And you could say I had a lot of spare time on my hands. And although I really love taking long car trips, the last time I did one of this length was about 30 years ago. And I think I did about 15,000 miles in 13 weeks. And back then it was a lot different than it is now. There weren't any Spotify or Waze apps or cell phones or even CD changers to provide me with entertainment. I think I just had a tape deck. I'm not sure if I still have the tapes, but this time when I was driving, it took me about 8 days, but the time just kind of flew by, and I listened to music on Spotify and on the radio and whatever else, and then when I got bored, I would call friends if I was one of those really long stretches of road. So I know I'm dating myself here, but I was talking to this friend who I met at Rome way back in the early days of the PBX in the call center. And when I called her, she just happened to be in the process of interviewing with a company who does outbound dialers for SMBs. And she was really excited about it. And she asked me if she could pick my brain on the industry because she knows what I do. And she wanted to do well in her interview. And in particular, of course, she wanted to know about the outbound dialing area because she had really, really been out of contact centers for a while. But what really surprised me about the way she approached it was even though she was a very high-tech person and one that had worked in the contact center area, her perception of the industry was really firmly rooted in what I call the dark side of the dialing industry, and that's the part that's forever been pegged with the term robocall. And that's actually what she said to me. She wanted to know about the robocall industry. So I have to say that not being in the same room, I couldn't slap her, and although I thought about it, what I ended up doing was telling her I never wanted to hear her use that term again because it's just a negative term that's been stuck on that part of contact centers for decades. And I finally told her after some back and forth that I was going to give her a sort of a fast forward of where she started at Rome and where we actually are in the industry, because if I didn't, she was going to fall flat on her face in the interview. So what I did was I decided to do one of my favorite things, because I'm a self-proclaimed contact center historian, and tell her a history story about outbound dialing market and how it's changed, the new features and use cases, and, of course, things like regulation in the industry. But what happened when I was doing this was first thing I did was I was describing to her all these new capabilities, and I kept moving around between technologies as if the interaction silos that we've been talking about for decades really haven't existed. And I was wandering back to basic outbound from a historical perspective, but I started weaving this complex picture of proactive, interactive, omni-channel customer engagement. And in fact, I segued to omni-channel to explain to her how customers in the industry have been marching to the drumbeat of omni-channel for about 4+ years now. She didn't even know what it was. And I know that because it was early 2013 when I first saw this term omnichannel in an article in Retail. I loved the concept. I stole it, and I created a market report that was really kind of built out the concept for customer contact. And I put a stake in the ground for the industry of how and why we should be providing what's now described as a seamless customer journey. But the second thing that happened was that I knew in this history lesson for her that I was trying to tie this all up in a neat bow so that she would remember it and be able to talk about it. And that bow is really the hallmark of customer contact, and that's improving the customer experience. And part of trying to explain this to her was rooted in my real visceral reaction to her wanting to work for a company in the contact center area, yet being focused on a negative aspect of it. But more importantly, I wanted to focus on the customer experience because it doesn't matter if you're providing agents with new desktops and tools or empowering them to be flexible in how they handle calls. And it doesn't matter if you have the technology to couple an outbound message with an interactive component or add on a new interaction channel like social or mobile, unless the goal is to improve the customer experience. It's all about the customer experience and nothing else, or you wouldn't have customers. But one of the reasons why I tell this story is that my story to her started and centered on outbound dialing, but expanded to encompass the entire ecosystem of functionality we now can provide. But it also is a tale on how the industry has morphed to adding on and then connecting disparate applications and systems, and how it's now going beyond to really create some stunning and previously impossible customer experiences. And, oh, by the way, she didn't get the job despite my history lesson, and I didn't refer her to Noble Systems either, as I think that her stale thinking wasn't going to allow her to be a trusted partner, which an account exec should be. You know, you need to be able to think out of the box and connect the dots for your prospect or customer, particularly in this world of customer contact, which, as I think I mentioned, has gotten a little bit complex. And that's the case with Noble Systems, and who's joining me on this call today. Noble's a really great example of morphing from excelling at a critical component of customer care to tying all the components of customer care together. And it's a conversation I've had with them many, many times and with their customers over and over again. In essence, they did the reverse of what a lot in the industry have done. Many of these early contact center players focused on the core ACD and routing, and then they bolted on applications such as IVR and dialers. And in Noble's case, they became industry leaders in the dialer segment, and then they built out this complete suite of functionality for inbound and outbound, seamlessly blending them together, which is a similar journey that many customers seek to take, and probably what a lot in the audience are doing as well. But I'm going to stop here, as Chris and I will be talking about this more later. And I almost forgot about the whale tail. So the picture of the whale represents what I believe to be what's the stagnant thinking that's held back so many companies from really thinking about what's possible and moving from silos to contemporary customer engagement that provides these seamless customer journeys across this really increasingly diverse set of channels that we're providing. And while whales are among the most intelligent creatures on the planet, my English teacher in high school one time said something that just stuck with me, and I've used it repeatedly over the years, and that is that it takes 11 seconds for a whale to react after it's been harpooned. So you see all those little communication points in the picture? Well, companies are no different. If you aren't thinking about preparing for and moving towards contemporary customer engagement, guess what's going to happen? You're going to have a dead whale. But seriously, so on that subject of robocalls, here's something ironic. Robocalls back in the day became a slang term for ruthless and flexible outbound dialers that pounded the pavement for leads or collections, and so much so that we can't even use the term robocall in a positive way, even though we have just entered the age of the bot. And in fact, I'm midway through a series of these Frost perspectives I fondly call Bot Mania, because I'm crazy about bots. I mean, I'm not all bots, mind you, but the whole area of virtual assistants and intelligent personal assistants, chat bots, virtual agents, messaging bots, and perhaps even Siri, although I think I have this love relationship with her, a love-hate relationship with her. But even going broader, I understand now that Amazon Alexa has taken over in popularity from Siri, and for a real good reason, while Siri, and I have to say thank you, Apple, for your advertising dollars. While Siri did a good job of rapidly moving in an already tech-hungry generation of consumers to accepting speech technologies, Alexa and Google Home and others have the potential to dramatically alter the landscape of customer care by tying in the home and the Internet of Things with proactive customer care. As examples, some things I've thought about is, on a good note, you could be driving home and instruct Alexa to turn on the lights and turn up the heat. And my nightmare, on a bad note, imagine your cookie cupboard automatically locking you out after your bathroom scale alerts the media to your previous night's wine and pizza indiscretion. So anyway, you might laugh, but customer care is now about thinking outside of the box to the bots. Now we have technology we can tie all these technologies together and capabilities to create really new experiences. So how did we get from this concept of a robodialer that was ostensibly put in place originally to help the business achieve business goals to a robot designed to improve the customer experience? And how did we get from doing business where, despite the fact that voicemail was one of the first great simple achievements in business productivity, when it initially came out and was misused to avoid calls, it generated this term voicemail jail. And IVR, which I love, is, it's equally as important a technology achievement as voicemail, but it elicited not only IVR hell, but this phrase, zero out to an agent. So how did we get from these things to needing to develop self-service interaction channels because consumers are demanding them? That's a big step. So this does tie back to the story about talking to my friend, because not only do you and the audience need to think out of the box as to what you really need to do to provide great experiences for your customers, the technology is only half the battle, and the other half to omnichannel is going beyond thinking what's possible and getting buy-in and a plan across the organization to get there, and then finding the right partner to help you achieve it. So customers are really speaking out. Since the 1990s, once we added email and the web for interaction, we've never looked back. We've been ushered in this decade of multi-channel development that then turned into omnichannel delivery. In fact, it was between probably 2010 and 2012 when the industry added social customer care and then mobile customer care. And I remember this was such a big deal back then. For social, the idea that we could use Twitter to answer customer questions was pretty neat, but it was fraught with issues such as how do you know it's your customer that's tweeting when their Twitter handle isn't in your CRM record, and the overall common issues of who owns the channel and what are the rules of engagement for handling it. I mean, did social care fall into marketing, sales, or the contact center? Did you have to bring in legal? There's all sorts of questions, and we still get them today. And for mobile, after that first click to call to an agent on a mobile app, we also have never looked back. Now we're using them in the contact center for supervisors and agents, and not just for customers to interact with us. It's pretty clear now that customers just want to be able to contact a business when and where it's convenient for them. In fact, our studies have shown that customers will contact a business on an average of 9 channels, and this is expected to grow in the upcoming years, including adding things like IoT devices, as I mentioned previously. And then going back to my earlier comments on bots and virtual assistants, adding these new channels is certainly a focal point in our customer surveys at Frost. And so, like this recent one that we finished in October of 2017, it was called End User Priorities for Customer Engagement. It was a global study, and it was navigating digital transformation in contact centers. And 2 of the 3 applications that were targeted for the largest investment over the next 2 years were noted as virtual assistants voice. 47% of the respondents said that was one of the top 2, and then virtual chat or virtual agents on web. and that was 44% of respondents. And in fact, 23% of the survey respondents answered that they have replaced over 20% of their customer service reps already with technology solutions such as AI-powered robots. The study showed that this trend will continue over the next 2 years, with participants saying they plan to replace another 34% of agents with automated solutions. But I didn't say this is going to be easy. I personally think that in the case of bots, that enthusiasm at this point far exceeds the development of best practices, and that's another whole story. However, infusing AI into your customer service plans should be in any planning discussion you're having, because if you ignore it, that's going to be short-sighted. And there are also other roadblocks to consider as well. In various briefings I've had during the year, inevitably someone will say something about a greenfield opportunity. You get the quotes around that. A greenfield means, it's supposed to mean no forklift upgrade, but it's either a new customer that has nothing to start with, which would be true greenfield, or is willing to throw everything out and start over. But the reality is that these companies and gems are few and far between. And most of the people in this audience probably have a complete mix of technologies, maybe from multiple vendors. Perhaps your ACD is from one vendor, your IVR from another, and you have proprietary integrations to third-party apps such as CRM or other data sources. Some have on-prem and some in the cloud, or maybe all on-prem or a cloud. But most companies just don't have the luxury of completely starting over. So the first challenge is figuring out where you are and where you want to be and where you need to go and which issues to tackle first. So what are your business objectives that you want to achieve? Is it cost reduction? This might mean adding on a new channel in the cloud to avoid CapEx charges, or it might be tuning into one of the hottest trends, but one that's a little more subtle, and that is catering to the millennial workforce and younger that's been flooding our contact centers for over a decade now. And this is really the heart of what a contemporary contact center is. The younger workforce is not content with the status quo. Their desire for work-life balance, which is really the hallmark of this generation and younger, means that a contact center needs to be run more flexibly than before. You need to provide flexible scheduling options, whether that's split shifts or a schedule that varies day by day, so that perhaps an agent can take a class twice a week or pick up their child or whatever. And you need to allow shift bidding. And for a generation that lives on mobile devices, make mobile a part of the equation, too, for both agent and supervisor. The supervisor shouldn't be tethered to a desk, and an agent should be able to manage their work life from wherever they are. And that's whether just getting company news or being able to inform management that they're sick, or perhaps to bid on a shift when they find that all of a sudden they have more time. And these are just some of the advancements that are now being made for mobile contact center apps. But getting back to the nuts and bolts of the business, what do you do with this mix of technology? You need to find a partner that will enable you to do a mix of cloud and prem according to your business needs. And at Frost, we've also found that despite this sort of rampant movement to the cloud since 2012, more and more companies are opting for hybrid deployments than before, and for any number of reasons. And just as you might want to add on a channel such as chat and decide to deploy it in the cloud, because you still have a solid investment in your premise routing systems, you might as easily decide to move most of it to the cloud, but maybe leave something like a recording system on-prem. Companies have all sorts of reasons to move or not. But the overriding thing they do need is a plan and a partner that will get them there at the pace that they really can handle. And then finally, how do you handle all of the other competing distractions that, if we had our way, we could just ignore, like companies, like government regulations or security risks or keeping people's data secure and private? We're in this era of sort of hyper-compliance, and the companies in our space have to deal with all sorts of requirements, from protecting credit card information to HIPAA. Anyway, I'm going to stop and get out of the clouds here and bring in Chris Hodges to take a deeper dive with me and have a discussion about some of these trends and what Noble Systems is experiencing, as well as what they've done to overcome some of the roadblocks for customers in being able to modernize their contact center. So with that, Chris, you're up.
Good afternoon, Nancy. How are you?
I'm good. So I get to ask some questions of you. So as I mentioned earlier, Noble Systems has been in that contact center space for quite a long time. And you, as I said, you made your market excelling in one segment and then expanded outwards. So tell me how Noble has really evolved and prospered.
Well, thanks, Nancy. As you mentioned, Noble Systems has been around quite a while. We founded the company initially in 1989, so this is our 29th year of being in business. And I've been with the company now for 27 years. I started when I was 2. Fortunately, my boss had a lot of vision back then to bring me on board. But Noble Systems started off really as a side business to support our contact center business. Jim Noble had been in the contact center business since the late 70s, operating customer service and sales operations for a large company, and decided that technology was needed to automate and modernize the way that contact centers dealt with their customers, managed agents, and so he embarked on a program to build out the first generation of the Noble solution. And by the late 80s, there were a number of his colleagues in the industry that wanted some of that technology for their own call center operations, and hence Noble Systems was born out of that. And from day one, our motto has always been to improve the productivity of the most expensive resource in a contact center, which was the agents. Certainly back then, and to a large extent now, that's your biggest expense in a contact center environment. And so improving their productivity to increase revenue, decrease costs was obviously a key metric.
Yeah, absolutely. And using some of those tools, not just improving your productivity, but improving agent engagement, which, as we know, you get happy agents and then you're going to have happy customers, and that ends up improving your bottom line for sure. So along those lines, can you tell me a little bit about some of the things that you've done to innovate contact center technology and also improve both agent engagement and the customer engagement?
Absolutely. Well, it started off with the simple concept of decreasing the average handle time, right? So that improves the customer experience by generating a workflow, managing a workflow for the agent that got the customer to where they needed to be as efficiently as possible. We automated every aspect of the agent's job in the contact center back then, and that included accessing databases and mainframes and whatnot that perhaps weren't part of the contact center solution. So we created a product we called Mimic back then, which I think has a modern twist on it. They call it robotic process automation now. So talking about your robots, this ability for essentially an agent to do the work of multiple people by leveraging the technology on the back end. And that's one of the innovations we did, I think, early on. We integrated a voice logging system, digital recording for all the voice, back 25 years ago, back when you had to use cassette tapes. You mentioned cassette tapes earlier. We actually, in our call center, had one full-time equivalence job was just replacing tape recorders at Radio Shack and tracking all of the cassette tapes we had back then. And, one day Jim said, hey, I think the technology might exist right now for us to integrate digital recording directly into our contact center solution and eliminate that job. So again, that was, I think, way before its time. At that point, standalone voice loggers were very expensive, and only the very large contact center companies had those. So, because our company was born out of contact center operations, we looked for ways to improve the way that those operations worked for ourselves first, and then through customers and their requirements, and the needs that they brought to us, we innovated the solution to incorporate those, not just for one particular customer, but in such a manner that it could benefit all customers. And that's been a cornerstone of our roadmap design and development strategy, is to make sure that any feature functionality that any customer needed or wanted was made available for all of our customers to use. So that's one of the reasons why our product roadmap looks the way it does, Nancy.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Please don't tell me that you guys invented music on hold, or we'll have to end this webinar. No, but you did mention something that I do want to reflect back on for a second, and that is that when you talk about your Mimic product, now, I mean, we've had robotic process automation in the larger business sphere going on for like 20 years, but it wasn't until really recently that anybody put the name robotic process automation to it, yet you guys had this way back before that, whoever made that name up. So, and continue to improve upon it.
Yep.
So,
continual innovation is an important part of our corporate culture. One of the things that we pride ourselves on is our patent portfolio. We have, I think, 150 active patents or patent matters right now. We produce more patents per employee headcount than Google or Apple or IBM combined. So that's something that's important for our business. We allow our employees and our customers actually to be part of the innovation there and become an author on the patent, and they get a plaque to put in their office, and they get a check when we issue a patent that they helped us design. And then we look to incorporate those ideas as innovations into the product. And sometimes innovation puts you on the bleeding edge, and that's not necessarily where all of our customers want to be. Being a 29-year-old company that has a lot of customers that have been with us for many, many years, stability and customer satisfaction for them is paramount. And so it's the balancing act between incorporating cutting edge technologies, but also making sure that they're bulletproof and that it'll work day in, day out, by hundreds of thousands of agents all the time. So that's how we look to the development of new products and solutions that we roll out to our customers.
So I have a question along those lines that will sort of combine what I was talking about, how your company has changed and how you became leaders initially, and your whole patent portfolio. Can you give me an example of one or two features that you've come out with that are cutting edge within like outbound dialing and proactive that have helped the customers?
Sure. Back many years ago now, we created an outbound IVR, which was basically unheard of at the time. Taking customers and presenting them with phone tree options, menu options on an outbound call. We're talking 20-something years ago. That, of course, morphed over the years into a use case of customer satisfaction surveys, before a call, during a call, after a call, transferring someone into interactive voice response. Today, our latest iteration of that is what we call Secure Payment Assist, which is a PCI compliant component of our IVR that allows our customers to take the agent out of the PCI zone so that customers can securely and privately interact with the IVR in such a manner that their data is secure and the contact center can achieve PCI compliance. That's something that many of our customers are very excited about. We also are doing some cutting edge things with speech analytics. With that outbound heritage, one of the things that's important for our customers is to make sure that they're accurately identifying the type of call it is on the other end, whether it's an answer machine or a disconnected number or what have you. So using speech analytics to do a detailed progress analysis of what's happening at the other end of the phone. Compliance is very important in today's world, and one of the ways that you can ensure compliance is to make sure you're not harassing your customers by over-dialing them and making too many outbound attempts to those customers. And these types of technologies give our customers more tools to more effectively contact those customers in a compliant manner.
That's one of the things I've really enjoyed talking with you and others at your company about, is the fact that some of these innovations are really geared at customers to get them to more easily solve some of these issues that I mentioned earlier. We'd all like to ignore if we had, if we could, we would ignore it, right? And so you've come up with some really elegant solutions that make it simple to be able to do that. On a totally different note, but also, along the same lines. So when I mentioned earlier about how the cloud has really ramped up since 2012 and it's impacted everyone, I was wondering how it's impacted Noble and their customers, your customers, sorry.
Right. So, we've been providing private cloud solutions to customers for a very, very long time. A lot of very large banks and other financial institutions in the U.S. And across the planet use our contact center technology, and their preferred method of deployment historically has been in their private cloud for control, data security reasons, and other points, the ability for them to seamlessly integrate into the rest of their environment. So, for us, there was no rush to come out with a quote-unquote cloud product, because our product was designed over the years to be deployed in those types of environments. And so we kind of sat out, 10 years ago when a number of smaller competitors were releasing, cloud solutions that were really only available in the cloud. Because when we talked to our customers, they told us, well, we're not really willing to give up any of the feature functionality.
That's great.
We want it all. We want to deploy it any way we want. We want it to be best in class in terms of feature functionality, but we also need it to be secure and all the other things that they're used to deploying in their private cloud. So, our motto is, your cloud, our cloud, your premise, our premise, doesn't matter to us, combination of both. We have customers that deploy our WFM solutions in our cloud, but have their contact center solution on their premise in their private cloud. We have customers that use our analytics solutions on their premise, and use other vendors' cloud solutions for their voice communications. So we're extremely flexible in how we deploy our technology based on what the needs are for the client, and those needs aren't always just operational. They may be, financial. They may be, based on information security and other matters. So, the cloud has been really good for Noble in that, because we are unique and that our solution set is a single code base, and it's the same whether it's cloud or premise, we take the deployment option really kind of off the table and say, it's whatever you want. Don't worry about that. Let's focus on what your business requirements are and how we can solve those requirements with our technology, and then the customer can decide how they wish to deploy it. It makes it easy. With the cloud, you've got these vendors out there that are focused on only providing a cloud type solution and not giving you the option for on-premise. And I think that providing customers a choice is almost always a better option.
So, Chris, what should we expect to see from Noble in 2018?
Well, I think you'll see us continue to push the envelope of performance for the contact center. As I said earlier, for 29 years, it has all been about performance results for our customers, their agents, and of course, the customers that they serve on the other end. You know, our culture of innovation is alive and thriving at Noble Systems. Our suite of analytics products for voice and non-voice communication channels is a big focus for us right now as a business. Things like speech analytics for other applications like I mentioned earlier, and taking that up to the next limit. You know, we think that our customers are really our best sounding board. One of the things that we do, and you and I talked about this last time we were together, is this thing we call Coffee, which is the customer open feedback exchange, where we bring in customers every month to our headquarters and sit down with them and spend a day and a half and ask them what's on their mind, what's keeping them up at night, how can we do a better job of providing solutions and products and services and support for their business, get a lot of keen insight from customers of all shapes and sizes and use cases and industry verticals. And they tell us what they're seeing out there and what they're hoping that there's a solution for these particular problems. And we build our roadmap out on that. We share what we're working on with them and get their feedback and offer to those folks the opportunity to get engaged with some of these products before they're out in the general customer population. We have annual users conferences that you've attended, Nancy, where we share the same type of information on a broader scale. That's how they're a lot of fun, and customers enjoy that. They also enjoy the networking aspect of learning from other customers and doing that on an intimate and a little bit not so intimate type of a basis.
Okay, hey, that's pretty cool. So I have one last question for you, and that would be, what advice do you have for companies that are shopping for contact center technology?
You know, that's a great question, Nancy. I think that they need to evaluate the vendors to make sure that they really do take the time to understand what their requirements are, the operational requirements, the technical requirements, the financial requirements. You know, we've learned over these 29 years that when we don't understand very specifically what a customer's trying to do, what problems they're trying to solve with our technology, they're not as happy as they could be. I think that shoppers should choose a partner that's aligned with them on solving those particular business problems. The reality is, Nancy, that these decisions to deploy contact center technology, whether it's premise or cloud, or 8 to 10 years or longer. You know, I know that it's easy to think, oh, it's cloud and we can spin it up in a month and, you know, we can shut it down anytime we want, but that's not what reality is. To get real functionality and real performance out of these types of solutions, it does require deep integration into other areas of the business. It does require operational changes to maximize, leverage best practices. And so these decisions are not something that the folks should take lightly. We're certainly seeing now a lot of customers that are, I'd say, second or third generation cloud shoppers. They deployed a cloud contact center a few years back, but it's not as robust as perhaps they were used to with their premise technology. Now they're ready for a more robust product to solve those business requirements, because those problems didn't go away. Okay, I think that you got to choose a vendor that's going to be around for the duration. You know, there's a lot of changes out there in the marketplace, competitors buying competitors, companies changing their product lines. It's very confusing. It's got to be confusing for the shoppers that are out there. You know, Noble Systems, not only have we been around for 29 years, but, you know, folks like myself that have been with the company for going on 3 decades. Our average tenure at Noble Systems, you know, from folks that have been with the company since day one, and folks that started yesterday. The average is almost 7 years. And
great.
there's nothing that can take place of time and tenure and knowledge and expertise when it comes to choosing a technology partner for something like a contact center technology, which obviously is a core component in your business.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, thank you, Chris. This is going to end this part of the program. So at this time, I'd like to ask our audience to take a brief survey to evaluate this program. While you're providing your feedback, we'll spend some more time answering some of the questions that you've been submitting during today's program, as well as go over our survey results. And while you're doing that, we're going to review our polling question. So what keeps you up at night? Obviously, adding interaction channels is the thing that kept everybody up at night the most. I hope not, but it is definitely, as we've been talking about in the webinar, gets to be pretty complex, and knowing what and when and which to add really matters depending upon what kind of industry you're in, what kind of customer base is. What do you think, Chris?
No, I agree. I agree with that, Nancy. It's interesting, as you were talking earlier on the call, and as I look at these survey results, it tells me there's a lot of people that are out there now still unsure as to what they're going to do with channels other than voice.
I like the fact that everybody compliance regulations. When I said that we'd like to forget about it, they voted really low. So anyway, we could switch to some of the questions that came in from the audience and answer those. Let's see here. We have a number of questions, and either one of us can take, but let's see. We were thinking about chat, SMS, email, but not sure where to start. How are companies allocating resources to handle chat, email versus traditional phone conversations? Do you want to start with that one, and I will add in?
Sure. Our customers, I think for the most part, start trying to figure out what type of resource they need to handle those channels. So they start allocating, a handful of agents in a kind of a dedicated environment, or they have specialist agents that can handle multiple channels to see the type of questions, so they can figure out what kind of FAQs they need to be able to present, what kind of agent workflow might be involved. If they've got mature standalone chat or email channels that they've been supporting elsewhere with a different group, then they move it onto a omnichannel solution like ours that also supports multi-sessions, so that the agents can really do both at the same time. And obviously, in the contact center, they're oftentimes interfacing with the same kind of back-end systems, and so it kind of makes sense to put all that customer engagement into the same agent pool.
Well, I think another thing is that it also depends upon your business. I'm surprised that email hasn't gone down as much as we think, but in some industries and in some companies, it's really still a very, very important way of communicating with customers. So one of the things that I think is best is always to do like a try and buy, and this goes back to when we were talking about the cloud. If you want to start out with chat or even a virtual assistant or something, you can use the cloud to kind of try and buy it and see how it goes, and then depending upon demand, then you can allocate your resources appropriately, and it also, as depends upon time of year and what's going on as to what's going to be happening.
Who's your customer, what they're trying to do, et cetera.
Yeah, and another question that came in that sort of related to this is very related to this is what are companies doing for self-service? I'll start a little bit on this. When I said that we have 9 interaction channels and we're going to go up to 11. Sometimes it just expands. So if you have, for example, social, which we started off struggling with early on, how do you direct a Twitter campaign, and now we have Facebook Messenger and WeChat and all of these other social, and we also have social communities as well. So it may very well be that the way that you offload some of your agents is to build out those social communities with really good FAQs and that people can contribute, and then you leave the agents for much more complex interactions. And is you can add on to this, or is this what you're seeing as well?
I think you're right on that. Again, it depends on the customer. If you're supporting an older generation, 60, 70-year-old folks that are checking in on a shipment from the dress catalog, or if you're dealing with millennials who just ordered a fidget spinner online or something. I think that self-service, it's probably already dead though, but anyway, self-service is, to me, another way of saying customer preference. It's all related back to the customer experience. We may think it's awesome because it saves us money, saves the customer money. The self-service really has to be a way of supporting what the customer wants. And so, in order to start there, you have to be able to provide them options. Like you mentioned, 11 plus channels, voice, email, online, a mobile app, the online IVRs, web chat, SMS, et cetera. You have to be able to offer those. Then you have to be able to track the customer's preference. So if you know that this particular customer only responds to voice or only responds to chat, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to then try to send them an email. So you need to track their preference. You also have to then monitor it, and you have to report on it because things change. Like you mentioned, seasonality. It could even be the time of the month. They just got their bill. When that happens, maybe, folks respond via email when they question their bill, but you send them a letter or a notice that said, hey, we're cutting you off. They want to call you because it's urgent now, okay? Then you need to review it. You need to have some kind of quality standards or some team in the organization that every quarter, every 6 months, every year reviews the overall picture, all the numbers. What are the trends? What's happening? What do our customers say? Survey your customers, interestingly enough. Ask them what they would like to see, what kind of changes they'd like to see, and make sure you have a flexible platform, like ours, that'll allow you to accommodate all those different channels. And give you flexibility to move back and forth as your business requirements change.
Well, again, that sort of answers the first one too. Is how do you know how to allocate? If you measure and report on and everything else, then you'll get those answers. So another one, also related to self-service, but it says, do you see chat contacts taking over traditional phone calls? And I'm going to start with this one because it's one of my faves, actually. No, I don't see that taking over.
Yeah.
No. So we've been arguing this for a long time, right? Is the voice channel going down? And actually, the voice channel is going down, but in relation to interactions, but not going down as a channel. So we're getting more interactions because we have social, mobile, and chat and everything, but we're not getting less voice. But what we're seeing, and you and I have talked about this, is that when you have all these self-service channels that you're doing, especially like with chat, and I've had some great chats with agents, by the way, as long as they're doing their job, as long as the self-service is doing their job, then by the time it gets to the agent, you're getting to those much more complex inquiries and much more value add. So I don't think it's ever going to take over the traditional phone. I mean, what do you think?
I don't think so either. Again, it's a demographic issue. It's a type of what the need for the interaction is. And if you look at the hierarchy of speed, chatting with someone feels much more instant than sending someone an email. How urgent is it? If it's something where absolutely positively have to get the thing that I want. Many chat systems that are out there, folks are just sending back these canned responses that have nothing to do with the question you're asking, so you feel like you're talking to a robot, and it's not helpful at all. And one of the things that our customers are telling us is they see the same people that call into the helpline, and at the same time they're sending an email, and at the same time they're on the chat thing because they're trying to figure who's going to answer me first. So you got to be able to dedupe all of that stuff so that really how many chats you're really getting. Oh my God, the line's blowing up. Well, it's the same people hitting you from multiple sessions at multiple times.
I can see it now. We can start battle of the interaction channels, right? So you can get the best answer the quickest on multiple, you know.
Exactly.
But it doesn't actually, to me, like I said, I love bots. It doesn't matter if you have a chat bot out there or you have a virtual assistant out there that can handle it. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
But one of the things that when I've been writing about this, AI and all of that, is that there's still, at the end of the day, things that artificial intelligence cannot provide in a virtual assistant. And there's just a whole slew of human things that are just not there, but a very valuable set of technologies. So somebody else asked another chat question that's hot today. How do you determine when your agents are overextended, like too many chats going on simultaneously, for example? Besides the fact that they sit there and they don't give an answer, that's obvious, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to take that one on, Nancy. We see that actually happening a lot if folks open up every available channel for an agent, pretty soon they get overwhelmed. And if they don't have the canned responses so they can quickly hit the FAQs and give the person an answer or then push them to another channel like, hey, I'm calling you on the phone now kind of thing.
Yeah.
Our Omnichannel solution allows for multi-session, and management determines based on skills how many sessions an agent can take. You have some agents, quite frankly, if it's complex, maybe they should only handle one, or maybe they're really good at what they do and they can handle 5. But, I think it varies, again, by the customer they're interacting with, the agent skill set, the complexity of what that particular agent is designed to, been trained to do from a workflow and from a process to manage. And you have to get the reporting, and we measure it, all of the utilization across all those channels for every second of every agent's time. So, when an agent's sitting there for an agent hour, if they're doing an hour of chats, they're doing an hour of voice, and they're doing an hour of email, we're tracking all that stuff. Every second of every agent's time is tracked. And unless you have that data, it's very hard to make intelligent decisions about what folks can handle, what they cannot.
Yeah, and I think there are a lot of best practices as well. And like as you said, it depends on industry and company and everything else. But you can have chat working very effectively and then get hit with, in insurance with the open enrollment where your questions are different or what have you. And then all of a sudden that changes. So that reporting is really, really important to understand that. Let's see. We're done with chat. So here's one. How do you keep up with new technologies with limited internal support people?
We hear this all the time. We deal with a number of large companies where the line of the business unit has to access external IT groups to get their support, and so they want to, but they want more control. We see it with small to medium-sized companies that have limited resources to begin with. And that's one of the things that's made the cloud such an attractive option for companies. You no longer have to deal with managing a data center or their operating system licenses or all this different hardware pieces and whatnot. So that kind of comes along for the ride with cloud. But, Noble Systems, and I know some other companies out there, offer managed services options, which are essentially customized programs to provide additional layers of support so that you have a specialist that understands your business very, very well and knows how your system's been configured and is a go-to person for any simple add moves and changes or just simple questions. This is, of course, on top of your basic support type of organization. We even have customers that have dedicated full-time people on their premise that we supply for either on an ongoing basis or for a limited basis as the project rolls out. So, having a deep subject matter expertise in the product solution, but also understanding what the business issues are for the customer, I think is something that's, again, important to have in a technology partner for your contact center.
Yeah, I think you made a really good point, especially with the managed services. It's not like an all or nothing thing. I mean, you may only need it for that limited time until you get up to speed and you get the kinks worked out, and then move to doing your own. So I think flexibility is also really key as well. Let's see. I have one from utilities here, and this is not for me because question, definite Chris question. Have you ever worked with utility companies?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. We work with a number of power companies, water companies, various public utility companies, both private and public, cable, telecom companies all over the world. It's interesting. You think of some utility companies as being what's the word I'm looking for? Stuck in their methodologies. Or many of them are very old. One of my very first jobs was working for.
I had up there. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, one of my very first jobs out of college. I was a co-op student. Was for a 100-plus-year-old power company in the Southeast, and I worked on designing motor control centers for a nuclear power plant. So that dates me pretty much as well. But the processes were so staid, but they were a monopoly, and so if you wanted power in that area, you had to get it from them. Well, that's all changed. It's deregulated, it's competitive. You've got companies buying power and reselling power. You've got alternative choices that people have, and you have to be competitive. And one of the ways you be competitive is to provide a better customer experience. And sometimes folks will pay more money. If I never have to deal with ABC company again, I don't care if I have to pay 10% more. I can't. Their service is terrible. So we're seeing it. As a consumer, I've got utility companies that as a consumer are dealing with my bill with email. They're dealing with us via automated payment and other information. When's the service man going to be here? You go in, you dial in, you get it from the IVR. So, utilities are, let's face it, the companies that have the most customers are the ones that need this technology kind of the most, right? And so you start, phone companies, power companies, utility companies, who's got the most customers? Any company that has more than X number of customers has a contact center or contact center-like operation to service those customers. They may call them different things, the order desk, the help desk, the service desk, what have you, but it's really, at the end of the day, the same thing. How do we interact with our customers in a way that is efficient for us but provides the customers the experience that they need so that we keep them as customers?
Yeah, I have that. And one thing is, and this ties everything back in together, you have to have consistency because my utility company definitely does a lot of outreach, and if there's a power outage, you get it. But you don't get it necessarily on all consistent channels, and that's huge. A lot of room for improvement.
They were the original predictive dialer was developed on the back of an outbound messaging through telephone to let people know about power outages. The very, very first, the automated dialing recorded announcement machines, 30 years ago, was the very first, power dialer technology. A little trivia for you there.
I know. I'm going to have to stop because we only have like 2 minutes. Someone asked a question about how to participate in the survey, and you just click on the survey widget in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And that's about all the time that we have right now for this portion of the Q&A. So if you submitted any questions that we didn't answer on the e-broadcast, then someone will follow up with you shortly. And if you missed any part of this or you want to share it with others, you can go to the on-demand version, and that will be available at www.frost.com/preferences. And I want to thank everyone for their participation in this e-broadcast and the Q&A session, and also thank our audience for their active participation. And thank you once again for being here today. Have a great afternoon.